I want to get some insight now from someone who has an extensive background in Greek economic policy. Miranda Xafa is Senior Investment Strategist at IJ Partners. Previously, she was on the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund. She's also served as the Chief Economic Advisor to the Greek Prime Minister, Kostas Mitsotakis. Miranda joins me in the studio now. Good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming in.
Good morning.
So, we were just talking about the markets there rebounding from a 3-month low. We were seeing money coming out of stocks, commodities flowing into those so-called safe haven assets. Would you say that things are looking up now? There is perhaps more optimism there that a solution can be found, that a default will be avoided?
Yes, the European Union and the International Monetary Fund have both made a commitment to help Greece, provided that Greece helps itself. And hopefully the Prime Minister will win the vote of confidence today, and the medium-term fiscal plan will be voted into law by the end of this month.
What happens if he fails to win that vote of confidence?
Well, it's important to understand that the Prime Minister's political survival was at stake last week, as members of parliament of his own party were resigning one after the other in protest of the austerity measures. So he tried and failed to put together a national unity government. So instead he decided to reshuffle his government in a way that brings in different factions of his own party. So I think there is little doubt that he will win the vote of confidence today, and that he will win approval for the medium-term fiscal plan. Now, whether such a heterogeneous government can in fact implement the plan is a different question altogether.
And this is the problem, isn't it? Because yes, we're all focusing on this vote of confidence, and there was a reshuffle in the cabinet, and clearly steps have been taken to try and stabilize the political situation, but his problems are far from over. He's been squeezed from inside the country, and then he's getting pressure from the EU and the IMF, and they're saying, listen, we're not going to approve a second bailout. We're not even going to approve the fifth tranche of your original bailout if you don't start cutting back.
Absolutely. And then there is a question of whether his new finance minister, Mr. Venizelos, will be sufficiently tough with the unions, and whether he will cut spending. I mean, I have to say that nothing in his track record suggests that he will. There were huge spending overruns during the 2004 Olympics, which he handled. And the way he handled the IPO of the electricity company a decade ago is a case study in faulty policy making.
Okay, so you're not very optimistic then about his chances of being able to turn things around. Nevertheless, he's pledged to crack down on things like the tax system, because, obviously there are loopholes there, and much has been said about tax evasion. Are you, how badly do we need to see some sort of reform of the tax system, and are you confident that it will be done in time to make a difference to the country's budget deficit and bringing it down this year?
Actually, the priority should be on spending cuts, not on raising new revenues. So far, it's the private sector that has suffered an avalanche of new taxes, and that has deepened the recession. The tax system does need to be simplified, so that's a correct priority, but it's not the #1 priority right now.
But then how do you bring taxes down? How do you cut taxes on the private sector at a time when the government needs revenue from anywhere, really, more than ever?
I think the government is talking about tax reform in the sense of broadening the tax base and cutting tax rates in a fiscally neutral way. So I'm sure that in the midst of this crisis, they're not going to curtail tax revenue.
We're hearing from IMF Acting Managing Director John Lipsky there saying that he's not focusing on a second bailout, that he's actually focusing on this current payment and what Greece needs to do in order to get this money, that will see it through payments, bond obligations in July. Given the sort of deadlock and division that we've seen, not just in your country, in Greece itself, but also elsewhere in Europe amongst the ECB, the IMF, mainly the ECB in Germany, how optimistic are you about the prospects of Greece being able to avoid a default, or at least being able to implement an orderly debt restructuring?
Well, I think that, as Mr. Lipski explained, the next installment is assured if Greece does its part.
That's a big if, isn't it?
By approving the medium-term fiscal plan. Then what I believe will happen is that the current standby agreement will be cancelled and replaced by an extended fund facility, an EFF, which is what Ireland and Portugal got. And then there will be a new negotiation on the measures to be taken more specifically in 2012 and beyond.
Okay, so you're confident that Greece will be fine, because some people are saying, well, you know, even if this payment on the original bailout is approved and assured, as you say, will that only sees them through to September? Then, you know, you're just kicking the can down the road all the time.
Well, not really, because in addition to the medium-term fiscal plan, Greece has to approve now measures to make sure that this year's fiscal target will be met. So the target is to reduce the deficit to 7.5% of GDP from 10.5% of GDP
You're
last year.
confident that can happen?
Well, they have promised to do that, and they better deliver. I mean, you heard Mr. Juncker's comments earlier.